I think those fouls have to be called. Look at this, okay? Careful.
Oh, then Beasley.
We saw this last year too.
And when
It's the same thing.
when it gets near the stands is where it gets a little dangerous.
Yep. I don't mind the physical play. I don't mind guys getting, into it a little bit, but don't let it spill over into it.
What went down between Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley wasn't just another heated moment on a basketball court. This wasn't simply two former NBA players losing their tempers during a Big 3 game. By the time everything unraveled in Los Angeles, it felt like years of unresolved tension had finally exploded in public. These are two former teammates who clearly never put certain issues behind them, and opening night became the breaking point. When it was all over, two players had been ejected, another was thrown out for actually throwing punches, and the officials ended up calling the game entirely. The defending champion Miami 305 lost by forfeit during the very first game of its title defense, and suddenly the entire basketball world was talking about it. We're going to get into what happened on that court, how things escalated so quickly, and why this became one of the wildest scenes basketball has seen in recent memory. But before you can understand the fight, you have to understand the people involved, because this story carries more weight when you know who Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley really are. And honestly, there's another side to all of this that goes beyond the confrontation itself. There's a bigger picture here that a lot of people are overlooking. So let's start with Dwight Howard. When you talk about his career, you're talking about one of the most accomplished big men of his era. He's an 8-time NBA All-Star, a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, an NBA champion with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2020, and the first overall pick in the 2004 NBA Draft. For a long stretch, the basketball world knew him as Superman. During his prime years with Orlando, Howard was one of the most dominant centers in the league. He led the Magic to the NBA Finals in 2009 and forced opponents to build entire game plans around stopping him. The combination of power, athleticism, and non-stop energy made him a nightmare matchup. His career achievements were eventually recognized again when he was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame as part of the 2025 class. That honor officially cemented his place among the game's greatest centers. After his NBA career ended following the 2021-22 season, Howard eventually joined the Big 3 in 2025. The impact was immediate. He became the biggest name the league had ever brought in and helped attract a level of attention the organization hadn't seen before. As a member of the LA Riot, he's become the centerpiece of the franchise and one of the faces of the entire league. Now let's switch over to Michael Beasley. Beasley is one of those players whose NBA journey often gets remembered differently than the expectations that followed him into the league. Coming out of Kansas State, the hype around him was massive. He was selected second overall in the 2008 NBA Draft, right behind Derrick Rose. At the time, many people viewed him as a future franchise player and potential all-star. His NBA career had plenty of ups and downs, but his story didn't end there. What he's accomplished in the Big 3 has been impressive in its own right. Beasley has turned himself into one of the biggest stars in the league and has won back-to-back Big 3 MVP awards. By the time the 2026 season arrived, Michael Beasley wasn't just another former NBA player trying to stay active. He was the face of the Big 3. After leading the league in scoring and guiding Miami 305 to the 2025 championship, Beasley had firmly established himself as the greatest player the organization had seen. In this league, nobody looks at him as a player who fell short of expectations. He's the guy everyone is chasing. And heading into the new season, his focus was simple: defend the title. Miami 305 came into the year loaded with proven talent. Lance Stevenson was back after helping Beasley win the championship and arriving as the top overall selection in the Big 3 draft. Mario Chalmers, remembered by many for his championship years with LeBron and the Miami Heat, was also on the roster.
Then there was Reggie Evans, bringing toughness and veteran experience. This was a group built with another championship run in mind. Now here's where everything starts to take on a different meaning. Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley weren't just opponents, they used to be teammates. Both shared a locker room during the 2015-16 Houston Rockets season. Think about that for a second. These weren't two players who only knew each other from competing on opposite sides. They practiced together, traveled together, and spent an entire season inside the same organization. That Rockets team was built around James Harden and came into the year with major expectations after reaching the Western Conference Finals the season before with a 56-26 record. But the 2015-16 campaign didn't live up to those expectations. Houston struggled throughout the season. Howard appeared in 71 games, while Beasley played in only 20 before the team moved on. After that year, both players eventually went their separate ways. Howard continued his NBA journey through stops in Atlanta, Charlotte, Washington, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia before his NBA career ended in 2022. Beasley's NBA run came to a close even earlier after the 2018-19 season. As for what happened between them in Houston, nobody has fully laid it out publicly, but what has become clear is that whatever tension existed didn't disappear when their Rockets days ended. Beasley had already built a reputation in the Big Three for getting under Dwight Howard's skin. Reports from multiple sources pointed to a pattern of targeted trash talk directed specifically at Howard during previous matchups, not the usual back-and-forth competitors engage in, something that seemed much more personal. And there was already a warning sign before this latest incident. During the 2025 Big 3 season opener, the two were involved in a physical altercation that spilled into the stands. At the time, the league showed some patience as both players were still adjusting to their first season in the Big 3. But that patience only goes so far, and when they met again in Los Angeles on Saturday night, that line was finally crossed. Before getting into the chaos itself, it's important to understand the setting. This marked the 9th season of the Big 3. The league was founded in 2017 by Ice Cube and Jeff Quatnitz as a 3-on-3 competition featuring former NBA players. Clyde Drexler, the Hall of Fame guard and two-time NBA champion, serves as commissioner. The format differs from traditional basketball. Games are played on a half court, teams race to 50 points, and the league features a 4-point shot in addition to standard scoring. From the beginning, physical play has always been one of the defining characteristics of the Big 3. What happened next is where this game completely unraveled. The officials had already tossed Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley, and it looked like the situation might finally cool down, but the frustration never left the floor. The atmosphere was still tense, and everybody could feel it. Then Lance Stevenson and Jordan Crawford got tangled up in their own confrontation. What started as another physical exchange quickly escalated. Stevenson, a player who built a reputation throughout his career by getting into opponents' heads, found himself right in the middle of the chaos. The emotions that had been building all night finally spilled over. At that point, the focus was no longer on the score, the championship banner, or opening night. The game had become about maintaining control, and control was slipping away fast. Players from both teams were exchanging words. Officials were trying to separate bodies and restore order. The crowd watched as the tension that had been simmering throughout the contest continued to grow. The LA Riot had been in command of the game, leading 33-25 after Dwight Howard helped establish control around the basket. For much of the night, it looked like basketball was going to be the main story.
Instead, the physical style that defined the Big 3 became the backdrop for something much bigger. This matchup had already carried extra weight because of the history involved. Howard and Beasley were not strangers. They had shared a locker room during their time with the Houston Rockets. Whatever issues existed between them appeared to survive long after those NBA days ended. Reports had already pointed to previous instances of Beasley targeting Howard with trash talk during earlier Big 3 meetings. There had even been a physical altercation involving Howard and Lance Stevenson during the 2025 season opener. So when the rebound battle between Howard and Beasley turned into a confrontation, it felt less like a surprise and more like a situation that had finally reached its breaking point. The sequence started under the basket during a fight for position. Howard appeared to catch Beasley with an elbow while both players battled for the rebound. Whether intentional or accidental became irrelevant almost immediately. Beasley reacted. Howard answered back. The two squared up and the confrontation exploded. Players rushed in from both sides as officials scrambled to regain order. Technical fouls followed, ejections followed, and suddenly two of the league's biggest stars were headed to the locker room. Most games would have ended their drama right there. This one did not. With emotions still running high, the conflict simply shifted to different players. Stevenson and Crawford became the next focal point. The tension that began with former teammates had now spread across the floor. What was supposed to be a showcase matchup between the defending champion Miami 305 and the LA Riot had transformed into one of the wildest scenes the league had seen in years. By that stage, basketball had become secondary. Everybody was watching to see whether the situation could be contained before it got even worse. That was the moment the entire situation went off the rails. This was no longer a heated exchange or players shoving each other after a hard foul. Lance Stephenson threw punches, actual punches. Once that happened, players from both teams rushed back into the chaos and the court turned into complete disorder. Bodies were everywhere. For a professional basketball game, it was the kind of scene you rarely ever see. The officials had no choice but to eject Stevenson immediately, and that decision triggered an even bigger problem. The structure of the Big Three is very different from the NBA. NBA teams have large rosters and can usually survive a few ejections if they have to. The Big Three doesn't operate that way. It's a 3-on-3 league with limited rosters and minimal player requirements. Miami 305 was already missing Reggie Evans because of injury before the game even started. Now, Michael Beasley was gone. Now, Lance Stephenson was gone. Suddenly, the defending champions were left with only 2 active players, and you cannot continue a 3-on-3 game with 2 people. There was no workaround. There was no alternative solution. The officials were forced to enforce the rule as written. The game was over. Miami 305 had to forfeit. The LA Riot were awarded the victory by a final score of 39-30. Just like that, the defending champions opened their title defense with a loss. Not because the clock ran out, not because they were beaten in a completed game, because they no longer had enough eligible players to continue. Afterward, the Big Three released an official statement confirming exactly what happened. Beasley and Stephenson had both been ejected. Miami 305 was reduced to 2 active players. The game was declared a forfeit. LA Riot got the win. The reaction was immediate. Social media exploded with clips from the fight. Basketball fans were sharing the footage everywhere. Major accounts like Ball is Life, Legion Hoops, and House of Highlights quickly pushed the videos out across their platforms. People across the basketball world had plenty to say about what they had just watched.
But the story didn't stop once the final ruling was announced. The league still had to decide what consequences would follow. Opening night had turned into a brawl that ended in a forfeit, and disciplinary action was always going to be part of the conversation. That answer came quickly. According to Chris Haynes, both Michael Beasley and Lance Stephenson received 1-game suspensions. That means neither player will be available when Miami 305 faces the Detroit Amps in Week 2. For Miami, that's another major problem. The team was already dealing with roster issues because of Evans' absence. Now their 2 biggest stars will also be unavailable. The championship defense has hit serious turbulence before it has really had a chance to get going. Dwight Howard's situation is a little different. Howard was ejected as well after the initial altercation with Beasley. He was involved in the sequence that started everything. The contact that appeared to catch Beasley in the face came during Howard's battle for position under the basket. Still, the reporting that followed focused specifically on suspensions for Beasley and Stephenson. Howard's name was not included in that announcement. That distinction has already become a topic of debate among basketball fans. Depending on how people view the footage, opinions vary on who initiated the confrontation and who was reacting to it. But ultimately, that decision belongs to the league. For now, the Big Three has made its ruling and moved forward. What makes the situation even more interesting is that the league had already shown patience in a previous incident involving some of these same personalities back in 2025. Back in the 2025 season opener, the league took a more forgiving approach. The confrontation involving Dwight Howard and Lance Stephenson that spilled toward the stands ended with ejections, but nobody was suspended. At the time, the explanation was simple. Both players were new to the Big Three and still adjusting to the style and physicality of the league. But that explanation only goes so far. When many of the same names end up involved in another major incident a season later, the league has to respond differently. This time, it did. Now, if we pull back from the fight itself, there is a larger conversation here. The Big Three occupies its own place in the basketball world. It was never designed to be the NBA. The league gives former high-level players a stage to continue competing, stay connected to the game, and perform in front of fans who followed their careers. Ice Cube built the league into something legitimate. With Clyde Drexler serving as commissioner, the organization has consistently tried to establish credibility and stability. The talent level has continued to grow. Bringing in Dwight Howard after his Hall of Fame induction in 2025 was a major moment for the league. His arrival brought attention that few players could generate.
At the same time, Michael Beasley entered the season as a two-time MVP and the reigning champion, giving the Big Three one of its strongest storylines heading into 2026. That's why what happened on opening night creates two very different reactions. On one side, the incident generated enormous attention. The clips spread across social media almost instantly. People who had never watched the Big Three games suddenly knew about the league. They learned Dwight Howard was playing there. They learned Lance Stephenson was the defending champion. And they learned something major had happened on opening day. In today's sports landscape, attention matters. Having the entire basketball community discussing your league is valuable exposure. But there is another side to it. A season opener ending in a forfeit because a team no longer has enough players available is not the kind of headline any league wants. It raises questions about discipline. It raises questions about how much physicality is too much. And for Miami 305, it creates immediate concerns about their championship defense.
With Beasley and Stephenson suspended and Reggie Evans already unavailable, the road ahead suddenly looks much tougher. Then there's the personal side of this story. At its core, this was not just two opponents getting into an argument. This involved former teammates. Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley once shared a locker room in Houston. They practiced together. They were part of the same organization. Whatever happened during that disappointing 2015-16 Rockets season was never fully explained publicly, but it also appears it was never completely left behind. Sometimes unresolved issues stay buried for years. Then one moment brings everything back to the surface. For Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley, that moment came during a rebound battle in a 3-on-3 game in Los Angeles during the summer of 2026. And before this story ends, Lance Stephenson deserves his own discussion. During his NBA career, Stephenson built a reputation as one of the game's most effective agitators. Fans remember him as born ready from his years with the Indiana Pacers. He knew how to frustrate opponents, he knew how to get inside people's heads, and some of the most memorable moments of his career came from that ability. The most famous example was probably his playoff battles with LeBron James. Stephenson wasn't acting on emotion in those moments. He was being deliberate. He understood exactly how to create distractions and pressure, and he used that skill whenever he saw an opportunity. Lance Stephenson built his reputation with physical, hard-nosed Indiana Pacers teams, and in many ways he became the face of that style. That is why what happened later in this game stood out so much. After the Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley incident, Stephenson found himself in a separate confrontation with Jordan Crawford. Things escalated beyond trash talk and shoving when Stephenson started throwing punches. When a player known for staying composed while getting under opponent's skin reaches that point, you know the temperature of the game had completely changed. The consequences were immediate and significant. Stephenson was the #1 overall pick in the Big 3 draft a year ago and played a major role in helping Miami 35 win the championship. Alongside Beasley, he forms the core of that team. Now, both players will miss Week 2 because of what happened on opening night. That is the price Miami 35 is paying right now. There is also a bigger takeaway here. When fans see a fight break out during a basketball game, the first explanation is usually simple. Emotions rise, the competition gets intense, and physical play eventually spills over. Those factors were clearly present here, but the Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley situation appears to go deeper than a single heated moment. Across multiple Big 3 seasons, Beasley had developed a reputation for directing specific trash talk toward Howard. This was not just ordinary back and forth on the court, it was targeted and personal, the kind of talk that seemed designed to get a reaction. Whether that traces back to their time together in Houston or is simply part of Beasley's competitive approach, the outcome ended up being the same. Howard had been tested before, and on this night he appeared to reach his limit. Now the focus shifts to what comes next. Miami 35 suddenly faces a difficult situation. Without Beasley and Stephenson available against the Detroit Amps in Week 2, they will be operating short-handed. What should have been a manageable early season game now carries much more pressure. A loss would drop the defending champions to 0-2. In a league with a short schedule, every game carries weight, every week matters, and Miami 35 has created a tough challenge for itself before the season has really settled in.
For the LA Riot, the result goes into the standings as a 39-30 victory. Still, Dwight Howard has his own questions to answer regarding his involvement in the events that unfolded. He is the most recognizable player in the Big Three. He is a Hall of Famer. He is also one of the league's biggest attractions as it continues trying to expand its reach. Being involved in an opening night fight that ultimately contributed to a forfeited game is not the kind of spotlight most leagues want. The Big Three has already suspended Beasley and Stevenson. Now, many people will be watching to see whether Howard receives any additional discipline. Meanwhile, the footage continues to circulate everywhere. Basketball fans across social media have already seen the clips, and the discussion surrounding the incident is not slowing down. So this is where things stand right now. Two former Houston Rockets teammates, Dwight Howard and Michael Beasley, brought long-standing tension onto a Big Three court during the opening night of the 2026 season, which should have been a showcase matchup between the LA Riot and Miami 305, ended with complete chaos. A game that started as a tough but legitimate basketball contest eventually unraveled into a full-on altercation involving multiple players. By the time everything settled down, Michael Beasley, Lance Stevenson, and Dwight Howard had all been ejected. The situation got so out of hand that officials were forced to stop the game entirely and award the LA Riot a 39-30 victory by forfeit. The aftermath hit Miami 305 immediately. Chris Haynes reported that both Beasley and Stevenson received one-game suspensions from the Big Three. Just 1 week into the season, the defending champions are already dealing with major setbacks in their attempt to repeat. Howard, meanwhile, leaves with the win officially attached to his team, but not without questions surrounding his involvement in the incident. As one of the league's biggest stars and a basketball Hall of Famer, attention has now shifted toward whether the Big Three decides any further discipline is necessary. The reaction has been non-stop ever since. From social media platforms to major sports networks, people are still debating every part of what happened. This is what it looks like when some of the league's most recognizable names bring years of tension onto the same court. A simple rebound battle turned into something much larger, setting off a situation that seemed ready to explode the moment the right spark appeared. And chances are this story is not finished yet. The Big Three season is only getting started. At some point, Beasley and Howard are likely going to find themselves on the same court again. When that happens, everyone in the building and everyone watching from home will be paying attention to every interaction. So where do you stand on all of this? Should the Big Three have gone further with Dwight Howard? Do you think Beasley's history of going after Howard made a moment like this unavoidable? Let me know in the comments, because this discussion is definitely not ending anytime soon. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure you are, because if these two cross paths again, you're gonna want to see how it unfolds.